As we approach 10 years since the drinking water crisis, we continue to protect our water. This week, we're going to talk about how a local research center is focusing more on what's outside the lab. Laura Sandlin joins us live in studio. So what do these efforts look like?
Jeff, I visited the National Center for Water Quality Research along with the Sandusky River Watershed Coalition. There I spoke with the director and field manager who says education and outreach can make the biggest difference.
Located in Tiffin, the National Center for Water Quality Research and the Sandusky River Watershed Coalition tests water samples to determine the health of rivers and streams.
So the rivers are very important, like you just said, because they do connect to the lake. A lot of people don't realize that.
Jacob Beeler is the coordinator for the watershed and field manager for the research center. He says water chemistry and nature's natural cycle influence the health of the lake.
That relates to the water chemistry, so the things going on with the water as far as nutrient pollution, things like that. So if we have too much nitrogen, too much phosphorus, that can lead to algal bloom issues, and then that will potentially cause things like kind of disrupt that food web.
Beeler says this process can be affected by humans. From dumping trash to runoff from farms, the lake can become polluted.
All of that water ends up out back into our rivers and streams, and so any way that you're utilizing that water eventually can end up out into the lake. So you have to be aware of the things you're doing here and how that can impact the lake itself.
However, he says through education and outreach, things can change.
We do a lot of community workshop type events. We go to local schools and stuff. So for the local schools, we have this watershed model that the kids actually get to like spray water on it and make it rain and like make it look like and see where the water flows throughout a watershed and explain to them what a watershed is. For like the farming side of stuff, we'll host workshops and work with other organizations like Farm Bureau, Soil and Water Conservation District, stuff like that, to host events where we can help educate farmers on things they can do to help clean up water quality.
Laura Johnson, director for the research center, says no matter how far you go, what you do can influence the quality of Lake Erie.
It's interesting. So the farther you get away from the lake, and we can't get that far away even, it's like what, just a few hours, it sometimes seems like people forget or don't realize that that small ditch or that small creek ultimately will end up in the lake. So anything you're doing there can have the potential to carry any of those contaminants all the way out to the lake. And so just trying to make sure people realize the holistic nature of this region, how every little bit of what we're doing, both good and bad, can influence the lake.
Johnson and Beeler say the best way to do your part is to join local groups to get educated and from there help inform others on what they can do to keep our waters clean. Reporting in studio, Laura Sandlin, WTOL 11.
Let's bring in meteorologist John Birchfield once again. He's got our algal bloom lookout, or outlook rather, for this week. So what are we seeing this week, John?
Hey, Jeff, we're really starting to notice an impact of these hot temperatures on the Lake Erie water in terms of temperatures that are skyrocketing, especially in the shallower western basin. The latest buoy observations on Lake Erie are showing temperatures that are through the roof, now closing in on 80 degrees. Today's temperature of Lake Erie is the warmest in the past decade at 79 degrees. Here's that latest observation there in western Lake Erie, 79 degrees. Across the entire lake, temperatures are considerably above average. Where the water's a bit deeper, it isn't quite as warm. Eastern Lake Erie looking at temperatures that are in the lower 70s. In far eastern Lake Erie near Buffalo, today was the earliest that 70-degree temperature was actually recorded, and that orange color that you see in eastern Lake Erie, that indicates 70-degree readings. So in other words, this heat wave is not only impacting the air temperature, but also the water temperature, and that could potentially aggravate the algal bloom and lead to a bit of a more severe outlook. Here's a look at those lake temperatures across the region. 79 in Lake Erie, not quite as warm in Lake Michigan, and of course up towards Lake Superior, temperatures are considerably cooler. Now today's water temperature is considerably warmer than it usually is. In 2020, on today's date, we were at 75 degrees, certainly warm by all metrics. However, the year before, temperatures were only 67 degrees in the western basin on June 20th. So it's amazing that over a 10-degree fluctuation simply due to the weather pattern that we're immersed in. That being said, we're still forecasting an outlook that is expected to be moderate to slightly larger than moderate, could be up to a 7 out of 10 on the severity index. And these temperatures inevitably playing a role, but also our June and July precipitation will impact how severe that algal bloom becomes. Jeff?
All right, John, thanks. Everyone who was here in Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan during the 2014 water crisis has a story to tell. We will never forget where we were when we heard about it and what we did to make it through. Here's how the crisis impacted one local man.
bottled water, and we still do bottled water. I don't drink the water straight out of the tap now.
Did you before that?
Yeah, before that I did, but not now.
The WTOL 11 team is committed to protecting our water. We want to hear from you. Send a video sharing your memories of the water crisis 10 years ago. You can text it right now at 419-248-1100. Text the word water to get a link to all of our coverage we have posted online.